Hello and welcome to this very special election week interview shows with Raw and the Boar, getting ready for the SU Spring Elections that are taking place this week. I'm James, I'm the head of news at Raw, and I'm delighted to be joined by Luke, who is news editor of the Boar. Luke, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, James. It's really exciting, actually. I'm really excited to be here. So, lots of candidates, of lots of voting to take place. So, yeah, really excited. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm sharing that excitement. We're recording this on Monday. Election campaigning has started. Flyers are being handed out. Banners are being put around campus. So it really does feel like election week here at Warwick. Now, today we are going to be going through some of the interviews that we have done with the vice presidential candidates that are taking part in these elections, as I should say. But they're not the only candidates, and they're not the only elections that are going to be going on this week. We've also got a selection of part-time officer roles being elected and NUS delegates being elected for the first time in the spring elections. And this is after Warwick's the all-student vote motion to re-affiliate with the NUS, the National Union of Students, where delegates that Warwick students vote for will be going to their national conference. So, Luke, what do you think voting for these NUS delegates is going to be like during this spring election period? Is it going to add an extra dynamic into proceedings?
I think so. I think so, James, because you've got to understand that this is the first time, obviously, that voting for the NUS delegates has taken place simultaneously with all the FTOs and PTOs. So there's a hell of a lot for students to sort of really delve into, and sort of lots of manifestos that need to be read, of course, lots of interviews that need to be watched. So it's really one of those where you've got to keep your eyes on everything that's going on. It takes a lot of time to obviously keep up with, but I think it's a really an exciting way to go about it. So I think there's a lot to look forward to.
Indeed, lots of candidates, lots of manifestos to get through. And you can find those all on the SU website, where you're now able to vote. If you go to warwicksu.com/elections, you can find all the information, all of the candidate manifestos, and that is where you can vote as well. And if you vote during this spring election week, there are some pretty good freebies being handed out by the SU, Luke.
Yeah, I believe if you show proof of voting, you are eligible for a free drink at Curiosity, and you also receive a free packet of Mentos, I do believe. So it's very
Yes.
exciting stuff.
Yes, I saw the voting booth today in Curiosity where you could get that token for a free large hot drink and Mentos as well. Lots of Mentos on offer there. So warwicksu.com/elections is where you can find all the candidate manifestos and be able to vote. But I think it is time for us to get cracking with the first interviews that we are going to have on today's show. These are for the position of Vice President for Education. So in this position, the VP for Education will lead on all student academic interests, will lobby for and providing students with the best educational experience at Warwick. They'll be involved in managing lots of different academic representatives voted through by the SU and by students, and will be involved in lots of different areas of the university, so liaising with the library, IT services, career services, and the learning grids as well. Now, we have three candidates that are running for this position. We've got Maniba Amjad, Kartik Kumar, and Sidhan Suave. Now, all of the candidates for all of the full-time officer positions were offered the chance to be interviewed by Raw and the Boar. And for the VP for Education position, Maniba and Kartik got back to us and accepted that invitation. So first of all, we are going to have our interview with Maniba.
Hi, I'm Amelia, Deputy Head of News at Raw, and today, ahead of the big decision, we are interviewing some of our full-time officers or potential future full-time officers. We're starting off today with VP for Education in the first interview of our series. So I'm joined today by one of our candidates. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Maniba. I'm a third year physics with astrophysics student, and I'm running for the VP Education role.
Cool. Very exciting. Very different to English, but very cool. Okay, so we'll start off with a nice broad question. If you can kind of summarise it, what, as VP for Education, what would your priorities be if you were to get elected?
So I have 5 main priorities in mind. So this includes fighting for students and keeping the rights to self-certify, releasing exam timetables earlier. My second priority is increasing the accessibility of education, so making it easier for students to get extensions and mitigating circumstances, and ensuring that teaching facilities are suitable for everyone. My third priority is keeping Wednesday afternoons free of timetable teaching to allow for students to take up sports and society activities. And my fourth priority is going to be to improve the SSLCs, to make them more effective and to make students feel that they're getting more out of it. And finally, my fifth priority is to decolonize the curriculum, which will involve continuing the work of the decolonization advocates in the SU.
No, that's brilliant. So kind of, I guess, jumping off a few of those points, but it links quite nicely to the last point you made about decolonisation. What will you do as VP for Education to ensure that education is accessible for all students at Warwick?
So is this more related to the decolonisation point or just general accessibility?
Just general accessibility and inclusion, yeah.
Okay, sure. So as part of this, I will ensure that students get more support when requesting extensions or when applying for mitigating circumstances, and ensuring that all students will have someone, ideally their personal tutor, to go to when needing support with submitting and mitigating circumstances. I will also push to ensure that the disability code of practice is better understood and incorporated across all departments. And I will also ensure that the timetabled rooms that are used for teaching are suitable. So suitable for the size of the module, suitable for accessibility, and appropriateness for the specific module.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. So this is another point that you kind of previously touched on a little bit. Would you encourage departments to maintain self-certifications, as some departments consider moving away from them?
Yes, absolutely. I think having the self-certification option is essential for students. I completely understand that it's difficult for students to always have to go for an extension or mitigating circumstances, and I think self-cert should definitely be put in place. And so I will work to make sure that departments that are trying to remove them essentially don't, and have them available in most circumstances.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. They are hugely important. And this is another quite, I guess, sort of hot topic when it comes to university education. So many students see the benefit of lecture capture, but this obviously means recording of lecturers and their teaching materials. How will you work with lecturers and the UCU to deal with issues surrounding kind of like their content and intellectual property?
So could you clarify that?
Yeah. So in regards to kind of lecture capture, it's something that a lot of students are very passionate about. But obviously this creates quite a lot of tension, because a lot of teachers are and lecturers are a bit more sensitive about having sort of their material recorded. And I guess the question is, how will you work with lecturers and the UCU to deal with issues surrounding intellectual property and issues surrounding whether or not to use lecture capture?
Okay, so I firstly think that lecture capture is essential for students, because there are many valid reasons why students may not be able to attend lectures, from disability or medical issues to appointments or job interviews. And so I think that it's important for students to have that lecture capture as a backup. And I understand that it's currently not consistent across all departments. So I think I would go to departments specifically that are perhaps a bit more reluctant to use lecture capture, and discuss with them what their specific concerns are. If it's a matter of lecturers not feeling comfortable with themselves being recorded or their material being uploaded, I think it's important to stress that the importance of it to have for the lecture capture to be available to students on the module, and to ensure their privacy, that the lecture captures are only accessible to students who are on the course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, 100%. So next question I've got is, what conversations will you have with the university to ensure that student uncertainty around their timetables is minimised, especially at the start of the academic year when they're often finalised close to the term starting?
Yeah, so I intend to work with the timetabling team and ensure that that students get more clarification around their lecture timetables and their during term time timetables earlier in the year. Obviously, I know that timetables can only be released once students have picked their modules, but I intend to work with the timetabling team to ensure that process can happen as quickly and efficiently as possible, so students aren't like waiting for their timetables like halfway through like term one, or having reached week 3 and they still don't have a full timetable on their tabula or something.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. That just makes everything a lot easier. So once again, the next question, we're going back to actually one of the things that you said about in your main 5 points when it comes to Wednesday afternoons. And with many extracurricular activities, including sport fixtures, taking place on a Wednesday afternoon, how do you plan to lobby the university to keep this time free from core teaching?
So again, I would work with the timetabling team to try and ensure this happens. I also intend to continue the work that's currently being done by the current education and the sports officers. So this will also mean that I intend to work with the next sports and potentially also the next societies officers as well to continue their work and to ensure that Wednesday afternoons are kept as free as possible.
Yeah, no, that's so important. So we've kind of got one question left, and I was just going to ask you about how will you encourage students to become course and faculty reps and help them engage with other students that they represent?
So I think the importance of becoming a faculty rep or course rep heavily depends on students feeling that they will get some benefit out of it. And so as part of this, I do intend to try and improve the SSLC committees to make them more effective. So some of the things that I intend on doing is surveying the current course reps, academic reps, and SSLC members to essentially see how effective they've found it, gain some sort of feedback as to how they feel SSLCs or their roles could be improved, and how much they feel that lecturers and staff members take their feedback on board. So essentially I think it will be putting across that point that departments will be held more to account, and students will feel that they're getting more out of being a course or faculty rep, and actually feel that they're making improvements to their course that will benefit people on their course.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So that's kind of all the questions I had. Is there anything else whilst we're here and we're chatting about the role that you would like to say or let know as to why people should vote for you for VP for Education?
Not particularly, just that I intend to work for all students and improve the education experience for everyone.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and best of luck ahead of SU elections.
That was Muniba's interview with Amelia. Now we're going to hear from Kartik Kumar, who was interviewed by Grace Goodwin from the Boar.
Hi, I'm Grace Goodwin from the Boar News, and I'm here to interview Kartik Kumar for their education position in the SU Spring Elections 2024. So for your first question, I'd like to ask, what would your key priorities be if you were to be elected?
if I were to be elected, my key priority would be to firstly emphasize the importance of education itself. I would just emphasize, what it means to be in a university, right? To have a degree in your hand, and I would firstly teach, do my best to make the good quality education. Firstly, by learning how to learn, right? And how could he better educate someone? And yeah, like I said, the first priority is importance of education itself and how to best teach it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. What will you do to ensure that education is accessible for all at Warwick?
I would do my best to firstly make sure that everyone deserves the best good quality education for no matter what course they're doing. I would ensure that all the way from the lecturers to how the course is sort of structured. I'd make sure that every student is getting good quality education. I'd speak to the higher authorities and make sure that's arranged for every student.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's part of that, but would you encourage departments to maintain self-certifications, as some departments are considering moving away from them?
Oh, sorry, could you repeat that?
So some departments are. Would you encourage departments to maintain self-certifications because some departments are considering moving away from them?
No, I would. I think self-certification is highly important. I mean, for every student, you wouldn't have any idea what they're going through. What the lifestyle would be. There's so many factors that can affect their learning. So I would definitely make sure self-certification available for every course.
Yeah, thanks. Many students see the benefit of lecture capture, but this obviously means the recording of lectures and their teaching materials. How will you work with lecturers and the UCU union to deal with issues around intellectual property?
And so could you structure the question in a different way if possible? I didn't quite understand.
Okay, so obviously lots of students use lecture capture and they need the recording of lecture, they need the lectures to be recorded and extra teaching materials. So because of issues with intellectual property, how will you work with lecturers and the UCU to make sure this goes as planned and runs well?
Yeah, just making sure that for every lecture they're giving, make sure that lecture capture is available, and then proper resources and proper further reading material are provided with the page they're using to access their course. With every module, make sure that the extra reading material, every necessary resources provided for students.
Okay. What conversations will you have with the university to ensure that student uncertainty around their timetables is minimised, especially at the start of the academic year when they're often finalised close to term starting?
So sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Oh, no, it's okay. So obviously at the start of the academic year, there's often kind of problems with timetables, student uncertainty around their timetables. How will you make sure that this is minimised, especially at the start of the academic year when undergraduates are starting and timetables are kind of being drawn up?
But yeah, I would make sure that again, I think making sure the lectures have been pre-planned, and making sure that every factor that can possibly affect the schedule is taken into consideration, right? And then that every lecture is properly updated, and that if there's anything that's not gonna, if there's any time or day where sort of a lecture has been cancelled, making sure that it's been emailed to the student beforehand.
Yeah, thank you. With many extracurricular activities, including sports fixtures taking place on a Wednesday afternoon, how will you lobby the university to keep this time free from core teaching?
But yeah, I think extracurricular activities is one of the main an important factor in a student lifestyle. I think the key problem would be lectures taking place in the late evenings. So I think as much as possible, I do my best to keep the lectures that are being presented around morning or the afternoons, because try and make sure that every lecture has been presented by 5 a.m. let's say, because I think that's for most societies. I think it's lot of the society's events would be taking place around after 5. So I think, yeah, I'll make sure that students have the free time after 5 to do whatever they're taking part in.
How will you encourage students to become course and faculty representatives and help them engage with the students they represent?
But it's just really important to have student and professor communication. So I would definitely speak to who is in charge of the department, and just make sure that I'll firstly ask the student, saying get feedback from them, sort of conduct a survey, and just see if the professor or any teacher is helpful, how can they improve, right? Yeah, and then make sure that every student has a good teacher.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think we're at time, but thank you for answering your questions, and good luck in the elections.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Now, to digest those interviews and what we're going to be expecting for campaign week, I'm going to bring Luke back in. Luke, what are you expecting the key points to be for VP for Education during this campaign week?
Yeah, I think a big one has to be the sort of idea of self-certs and mitigating circumstances. I think that's personally something that I've experienced a lot myself, and it's something that perhaps the university might be able to do a bit more for on that front. I know a lot of students feel the same, so I think that's definitely a key thing that students can expect to hope for. Also, the idea of study spaces, I think, is a big one, and especially more course-specific stuff. There's a whole meme, obviously, about STEM students in the fab, which we all know about that. So I think that's a massive, I think that actually has a massive role to play, you know, because like, especially once you start hitting term 3, and obviously you have essays and exams sort of thrown into the mix, you know, study spaces around campus, they're hard to come by. Like you look in the library, it's really, really busy. So I think students need to expect a lot more from whoever's elected this year on that front as well.
And obviously the VP for Education role, being able to liaise with lots of these different university services to ensure that there are study spaces or lobby for students for these study spaces. But they've also got spaces within the SU that are study spaces as well, which I'm sure they'll be keeping their eye on. So that is the position for Vice President for Education being elected at these spring elections. Now, the next position that we're going to take a look at is welfare and campaigns. Now, the Vice President for Welfare and Campaigns, as I said, one of the full-time officer positions being elected. They will lead on policy and campaigns that help improve student welfare at Warwick. Now, they'll be involved in liaising with lots of different university services like report and support, Nightline, the chaplaincy, community safety, and welfare as well. They'll be working with the SU Advice Centre and really having welfare at the heart of their role. It is in the title, after all. Now, there are 2 candidates that are running for the welfare and campaigns position. They are Naomi Carter and Rong Fu. Again, both candidates were given the opportunity to have an interview with Raw, and Naomi took us up on that offer. Here she is being interviewed by Kenzie from Raw.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie from Raw, and I'm interviewing Naomi Carter as she is running for Vice President of Welfare and Campaigns in this upcoming spring elections. So, hi, Naomi. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
So I'm going to start with your questions now. So the first one is, what would your key priorities be if you were to be elected?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one because there's so many things you would want to do as welfare and campaigns. But for me, I think the ones I've identified the most would be affordability, community, solidarity, and welfare. And I know welfare is half of the role and only 1/4 of the priorities I put, but I think it comes into a lot of the other ones as well.
Awesome. So how will you work to support student interest during the cost of living crisis?
Yeah, and I think the cost of living crisis is probably the major thing that's impacting students at the moment and is the most important thing for the role. I think there's a lot of great work being done at SU already. So I would definitely look to see what's already out there, what campaigns have been started that I could continue, like the Free Breakfast Club, but the cost of living like crisis survey, and also what I could do to facilitate more campaigns around especially sustainable food on campus. And I think for me, it'd be really important to help increase resources available to students like fridges and microwaves, like small things, as well as kind of longer term campaigns, like making the outlets more affordable and things like that. And I think it would also be very important to talk to students about the issues that they're struggling with the most and how the SU could support them in that, because like I can base on my own experiences and my friends, but I would want to be inclusive of the wider student community, I think.
Yeah, so kind of following on from that, what are the biggest issues regarding accommodation and how would you work to solve these?
And for sure, the cost of accommodation is something that is like a massive barrier to students, but unfortunately, like it's not something that people feel like is particularly in their power to change. So I think accommodation wise, I would definitely be working to lobby the uni to freeze rent. I mean, ideally lower rent costs, right? But more likely freeze, because the university is a pretty difficult set of people to persuade. I think also there is sometimes an unhealthy culture in accommodation, especially in on-campus accommodation, in terms of a toxic, sometimes sexist culture, sometimes difficulty accessing wellbeing resources, difficulty if you're a non-drinker, like I was in my first year. So for me, it would be definitely improving signposting for wellbeing services, providing resource packs in halls. That's something I would really want to do in Freshers Week. And also expanding the free period poverty campaign to on-campus accommodation. Yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities with housing. It would be quite difficult to like narrow it all down.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned well-being just then. How would you look to improve mental health and well-being provision on campus in like a broader scale?
Yeah, something that's pretty important to me is increasing and improving the intersectionality of the wellbeing services. I know, especially when I was women's officer in my first and second year, like we were really conscious of the fact that I think there were 2 sexual assault advisors, and I think there was only 1 person of color in the entire wellbeing team. I don't know how it's changed since then, but increasing the resources available for culturally competent training, also increasing the number of culturally competent like advisors at all in the wellbeing services would be very important. Increasing and improving signposting to resource are very important, because I think there's problems with the provision that's there, but there's also a big problem with people not either knowing or feeling able to access services. So making it really obvious right from day one what's out there, how people can access it, what different avenues there are through personal tutors, wellbeing services, mitigating circumstances, all of that. And then also doing the internal work with the other FTOs to actually improve what's provided.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's kind of following off from what you said, but last academic year, we've seen an increase in disclosures to report and support, but a greater awareness of the service with an increase in training hours. How would you work with the university services like report and support or the forgetting the words now, but you know what I mean, to tackle issues like sexual misconduct and bullying on campus?
Yeah, I think the cultural issues that we have on campus in terms of like a toxic culture or a rape culture are really, really hard ones to navigate. And I have previously been in meetings with report and support. I've been on the gender task force. I've been at the Warwick Inclusion Conference. So I think I'm a bit familiar with how the processes work so far in terms of how training is provided, how different members of the teams like interact. And there's definitely a lot more layers to it than I think you would realize from the outside. And I think the most important thing to start off with would be like familiarizing yourself with that, making sure all the FTOs understand how the processes work, so that then we can probably more collectively, because it is a really big problem, like collectively work to set an agenda to improve awareness of services, to improve training for students, maybe through Moodle courses, about how they can act to tackle toxic cultures. There's a lot of great things out there, like the active bystander training. And I think it's definitely increasing provision, resources, really pushing that, and also doing the internal work through like collaborating with the other SU full-time staff, officers, and all the services that are out there already.
That all sounds great. So I've got one more sort of specific question, and then we'll go on to the final question.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many different societies that represent faiths and cultural groups on campus, and some of whom have been impacted, obviously, by events happening around the world. How would you work to support these societies?
Yeah, I think it's always really difficult when there's so many groups that have very different memberships, very different priorities, opinions, views on the world. And obviously I have my own personal set of beliefs, right? And if I campaign for those outside the role, that's something that I would choose to do. I think the difficult thing would be balancing my personal beliefs with hearing what other students have to say, but that won't like close me off to it, right? So I think as much as possible, it would be about open dialogue, like sitting down with representatives from execs of different societies and talking about what's concerning them at the moment, what their standpoint is, what their members are saying. Also making sure that it's really clear within like the full-time officer team, like where we stand as an SU, where we stand individually, how those positions like go together. And yeah, basically being as open to sensitive conversations as possible, like not letting personal issues affect dialogue so much. Like I'm going to have my own politics, my own views, but it's not going to affect how I interact with different people and what they've got to say.
Absolutely. So the final question is a bit broader, so feel free to take it where you want. What campaigns will you be looking to run over the year if you do get elected?
Yeah, I think firstly I'd want to expand some of the existing campaigns. So I like relaunched the End Period Poverty campaign in my first year when I was the women's officer, and that's like been massively expanded by the current welfare and campaigns officer. So I would look to expand that more because it's volunteer led at the moment. So getting more volunteers if possible, and also looking to expand provision to more of the buildings in the STEM subjects. We've found like less people in, like for some reason, engineering, WMG are like more willing to put the products in their bathrooms. So we'll be looking to expand provision across campus, link up with the med school to see what they have in terms of the free period products and like other sexual health services. I also would really want to put sexual health resources in halls and more obvious period products and other like condoms, lube, like all of the healthy things like that. And also keeping the free breakfast club going would be very important. I want to also work with the Student Staff Solidarity Network and some of the liberation societies for the events and campaigns that they are already kind of thinking about in the areas of sustainable food, demilitarization, decolonization. One of the things that I think is quite simple, but something that I don't know why is not already out there, is a campaign for more resources for students on campus in terms of food, like the microwaves, kettles, fridges, sinks, all that kind of stuff. And also something that I had on my year abroad that I would really want to try and implement would be a swap shop. So a bit like the pay as you feel market that they sometimes have in Freshers Week, but making that a more permanent feature of the SU. And so people could, especially if they're exchange students or first years, exchange like household items, clothing, books, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I have a lot of ideas, essentially.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for agreeing to have an interview with us. We look forward to seeing your campaigns throughout the official campaign week coming up next week. So yeah, thank you. This has been an interview with Naomi Carter, who's running for Vice President of Welfare and Campaign. That was Mackenzie Pickersgill interviewing Naomi Carter, one of the candidates running for Welfare and Campaigns in these SU Spring Elections. Now, Luke, same question again. What do you think the key points are going to be during this election week for the VP for Welfare and Campaigns?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is probably signposting. I think that's such a big thing that a lot of students have sort of really spoken up about. It's a key thing within the manifestos. It was brought up at question time as well. This idea that, you know, if there's students struggling, where do they go to? You know, the SU, they put out these resources, but it's also quite a departmental thing as well, in terms of that if you need extensions or whatever, it's, you know, who do you go to with that aspect? So I think welfare, that's a really key part on that front, is making sure that students know what is out there for them and how to access it. And I think on the campaigns front, you know, there's a hell of a lot that Anaya did this year. And I think with like the End Period Poverty campaign, the Free Breakfast Club, I think students sort of need to ask what's going to be the future of these campaigns and how are they going to be implemented and sort of progressed moving forward.
Yes, so plenty of things that the VP for Welfare and Campaigns can be thinking about when they are elected and in the position come next year. Now, moving on to the next position that we are going to discuss, that is Vice President for Democracy and Development. Now, they're the position that runs all things democracy. So At the moment, Sophie Clark is currently in charge of running the election campaigns, also involved in delivering on things like the all-student vote and organising that. And they're also involved in leading the commercial areas as part of the Students' Union and working with the university on the Students' Union as well. There'll be the SU's treasurer, responsible for providing student oversight of SU finances. They'll also sit on multiple university committees, which cover a wide variety of different areas such as finance, commercial operations, estates, and sustainability. So they're really looking at engagement with the student body as part of their role. Now, there's one candidate running for this position, Sasha King-Smith. Sasha was offered the opportunity for an interview, but did not get back to us. So, Luke, looking at this position, VP for Democracy and Development, what do you think some of the big issues are?
Yeah, I think sort of similar to welfare, really. It's that idea that students need to be informed on how to vote. I think it's as simple as that. It's something we've seen. It was questioned a lot at the question time events last week, the idea that with the all student votes, like the turnouts aren't great, to be honest. And I think it's a case of students only perhaps voting for motions and not really having an incentive to vote against them, which kind of, you know, sort of puts everything into question as to, is there another way we can go about doing this, you know? So I think that, yeah, the key point has to be that students are getting their voices heard and making sure that they know exactly how they can and will do that.
Now we're going to go on to our next position, Vice President for Sports. Now, this is one that is close to my heart, having been part of swimming and water polo here at the university for the 3 years that I have been a student. Now, the VP for Sports are the public face and the leader of student sport at Warwick. So they're responsible for managing and helping all the different sports clubs on campus. So they'll be the main contact for these sports club execs. Now, they work with Warwick Sport as part of the sports partnership and working together with the university to get the best deal for sport at Warwick. They'll also be working with the VP for Societies to formulate strategies surrounding student development and skills, also involved in liaising with various different bodies on a local, regional and national level related to sports. And of course, some of the big sporting events that happen on campus, varsity, sports ball and the sports fair. So plenty of different things that the VP for Sports gets up to in their position. There are 2 candidates running for the position, Louis Gosling and Ben Tweedle. Both were given the opportunity for an interview with us, and Ben took us up on that offer. And Ben was interviewed by Raw's head of speech, Harriet Musselwhite-Steele.
Hi, I'm Harriet. I'm from Raw, and I'm here to interview Ben Tweedle. I hope I said your name right, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And he is running for the position of VP Sports in the upcoming SU Spring Elections. So again, hello, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, no worries. It's great to be here.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so let me ask you the first question. So what would your key priorities be if you were to be elected?
Okay, yes. So I've set this out in my manifesto as well. But there are 3 really key ones. The first, get the most out of Warwick sport.
Yeah.
Get the funding your clubs deserve, and improve quality of life for execs. There's a lot of other stuff that goes on around that, like increasing inclusion, making it easier to access clubs financially as well. Varsity with Birmingham, but the first 3 I said are the main headlines, I guess, of what I want to achieve.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. So what would you do to ensure sport is affordable to everyone at Warwick?
Okay, that's a really good question, and that honestly it touches quite close to the main kind of priorities I have. So there are a few avenues to this. There is obviously the grant funds that Emma has managed to set up this year, and that's a really good thing she's done, and something I'm really keen to continue and expand on, to like entry fees for competitions and stuff like that. Then there's also quite a big cost that a lot of students face getting into clubs, which is the cost of the passes from Warwick Sport. And we've got new leadership at Warwick Sport, and that's all looking really positive. And I'm really keen to take that in a direction where we bring that cost down for everyone across the board and get as many people into sport as possible.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you very much. So the past few years have seen a focus on tackling sexism in sport at Warwick. Will you continue the inactivities that are currently in place, and how will you ensure that there is gender equality with teams within Warwick?
Yeah, so that is obviously a very important issue, and we do have like the sexism in sport task force in place, and that does need to keep going. But one thing we really need to look at is getting as much engagement in it as possible, because I know there's quite a lot of engagement from mixed and women's clubs at the moment, but just trying to bring up the engagement from men's clubs and really highlighting where clubs are taking steps in the right direction and making it a thing that we need clubs to want to do. Because at the end of the day, you can only tell clubs do this, but you need to make people want to engage in it in order to have a real positive impact from it.
Okay, cool. Amazing. So how will you ensure that sports clubs exec create a safe environment for other students at socials, particularly during circling?
Yeah, so yeah, a safe environment is really important, and it's also important just to get the balance right between everything. So we have like the guidelines social sex agree to, and at the end of the day, it's making sure we're all, I guess, accountable to each other. So just setting a good example of where, say, so a mate's getting too drunk, looking after them, and making sure social sex kind of get the balance right as well, because at the end of the day, we're there to have a good time, and we have some very good social sex who run great circles at the uni. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's making sure that we have a good time. And I think in the grand scheme of things, a lot of that's happening at the moment anyway, and we're in quite a good place. But yeah, it's there's always more we can do.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So, how will you work to make sure sport club accessibility to students that do not play much sport before uni or might not have ever?
Yeah, that is again a really important thing that I want to look at, because at the moment, like the uni invests a lot in, say, like our Bucks funding and areas such as that, and that is really good, and I want to continue that. But we need to find a way to encourage the university to invest in just engagement in sport in general, because that is an area that I feel is quite lacking at the moment, and that engagement really is at the heart of what matters to sports in general. The more people we get into it, the more accessible it is to everyone, and a lot of it comes down to money and spreading the word and just getting as many people enjoying sports at the end of the day is quite an important thing. Because let's say when we leave uni in like 5-10 years time, when you look back, I don't know how many of you will think about your analysis 3 lectures and how many of you will think about your sports clubs, your societies, even just whatever you've been involved with, that is the memories you kind of hold dear to you after uni.
Perfect, thank you. So how will you ensure that both Bucks and non-Bucks clubs are equally supported?
Yeah, so that is yeah, really important as well. Again, a lot of it comes down to funding, because I'm sure, as you know, we've got this Bucks grant that's kind of ring-fenced for Bucks, and that was increased by the uni last year that they give to the SU to spend on Bucks. So it's about how we can then encourage the uni to increase their grants they give for non-Bucks as well, about how we can find more pots of money. And with Warwick Sport, they seem like they're kind of, with their new leadership, they seem like they're really positively looking into ways they can support things like this. So I'm really keen to work with them on that and get the best deal we can for student sports at Warwick.
Okay, cool. So lastly, this is the last question. What can you do to hold Akuma accountable for meeting their contractual obligations and providing student value for money with kit supplies?
Yeah, so Akuma, yeah, that's always a question that comes up, and always people aren't the most happy with Akuma. So we're in the contract now with Akuma, and I know a lot of people dislike the fact we're in the contract now with Akuma again. The thing that we can potentially bear in mind is that at Warwick we are one of their biggest clients, and potentially they saw how tight it was with us maybe switching to another supplier. So I feel like they're in a position now where they really want to keep us as customers, and that potentially is quite positive for us to be able to get the change from them that we want to see, and get the best deals we can from them. And I'm keen to have discussions with them about that.
Okay, cool. Well, that sounds all amazing. Thank you very much. And that is actually the end of the interview. They were all my questions.
Thank you for having me on. It was great to be here.
That was VP for Sports candidate Ben Tweedle being interviewed by Harriet there. Now, Luke, are you a big fan of sport? Do you play much sport on campus?
I'll tell you what, James, I might surprise you. I do quite a lot. I say quite a lot. It's mostly like personal sports. So I do jogging a hell of a lot. That really got me through first year. So, and I think, I've started boxing this year as well, which has been great. And I've been inundated with the very hefty sports fees, which is probably a big topic of conversation for us as well.
Yes, obviously the affordability of sport being a key question. What do you think we're going to see about that during this election campaign, and any other particular issues relating to the VP for Sports?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because both candidates have obviously said that they're going to aim to reduce that. I think Ben was perhaps more focused on the off-campus sports clubs, but Louis, by the same token, had a point to say during the question time about the sort of cost of transport, like to and from campus and stuff like that for off-campus events. So it really does go both ways. I think both candidates, you could see it a lot last week. They've clearly got a hell of a lot of respect for each other. I feel that this is perhaps the position to look out for. I think this is the one that might just go all the way down to the wire. So I think there's a hell of a lot to look out for from the sports perspective. And in terms, be it feasibility of sport, obviously that some students might feel that perhaps sports is something they have to give a miss, be it because how affordable it is and also how competitive it is as well. So I think there's a lot to look out for on the sports front this year.
Indeed, lots to have a look at through the candidate manifestos. And as you mentioned as well, the candidate question times that took place last week, if you want to watch the recordings back of those, see the questions that both Raw and the Boar posed to all of the candidates that were there. You can find them through the Raw visual YouTube channel. Now, racing on to another one of the team fun positions that you could say that there are at Warwick SU, the Vice President for Societies. Now, the VP for Societies, they are involved in, well, all things societies. As you could well imagine, they'll be the public face and the leader of societies, helping to manage them and engage with them, promoting different society events. They'll also be involved in organising large-scale events like the Societies Fair. And as we mentioned with the VP for Sport, they'll be working with them to formulate strategies surrounding student development and skills. So we've seen lots of skill swaps, for instance, happening over the past year. That is something that the VP for Sports, or the VP for Sports and the VP for Societies will be working on as well. There is one candidate for this position. It is Joe Stanley. And Joe accepted our offer for an interview. And here he is talking to Raw's very own Ben Cavassi.
Hello there, everyone. I'm Ben. I'm a member of the Raw News team, and I'm here with the lovely Joe, who is running for our new VP of Societies for next year. And so we've just got a few questions to ask you, Joe, if that's okay. So I think first off, we'll start with just what your key priorities would be if you were to get elected into the role.
I would think basic societies at the moment, promotion. affordability, definitely accessibility as well. Those sort of key ideas. Um, uh, yeah, definitely encouraging more involvement, allowing more access to things. That's the general gist of it.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Brilliant. Thank you. I mean, I think, looking at accessibility and stuff like that, I think one thing that's really limiting accessibility at the minute is the cost of living crisis. So
Oh, yeah,
while we're
yeah.
living through that at the minute, how would you, in the role, make sure that societies are affordable to join, and make sure that students can take part in their activities without worrying about expenses and everything?
Yeah, so I've had a number of ideas about one of them I wanted to sort of freeze the Fed fee. So I want to limit how much that's increased. I don't want it to go up at least too much, matching inflation. I certainly want to with socials introduce some sort of subsidy sort of system, especially for more drinks and maybe other activities. Um, and I'd hope to increase funding in general, because yeah, I do think sometimes that society events and things like that are too expensive. Like I was wondering, I don't know how much they'd allow me, but I think circling prices sometimes can be too high as well. Um, um, I think £7 to go into it, I think is slightly too much, but obviously I need to discuss it with the people who run the organisation to find out. But definitely cutting into the affordability issue is a key one for me.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I mean, I think looking more at your sort of, because obviously you'll be working within the SU, and as Vice President for Societies, you'll have a range of different societies coming to you with different questions and concerns, about events that they may be holding and all sorts. So how would you balance being accessible to society execs while still having to deal with a wide range of requests?
Well, my email will always be out there. I'll always be in the office. Well, obviously I'll have jobs, but I'll try and maximize how much I'm in campus in general. Um, yeah, yeah. I'll basically be free to talk to anyone. So I'll
Yeah.
make sure I'm aware of that. I'll definitely send out
Yeah.
emails going, please talk to me. You know,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't want
awesome.
anyone to be intimidated, and I don't know. With,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, that's awesome. I mean, you spoke there about, people, hopefully not feeling intimidated to, come with questions and
Mm,
concerns. I think
yeah.
one sort of sect of societies that may have issues with that are the sort of smaller societies or societies representing marginal groups. So how would you
Yeah.
help them as VP of societies?
I'll definitely contact them directly to establish a more one-to-one contact rather than having to come all the way to the office or email the central system or something like that. Um, I wouldn't mind keeping a one-to-one contact with the execs of those. That would be perfectly fine with me. Uh, yeah,
Yeah,
like
awesome.
I mean, if they have any ideas, then I'm more than willing to
Yeah. Brilliant.
go
I
into it.
mean, yeah, awesome. I think also looking at one of the key demands of the role is welfare. And then, so as welfare sort of becomes a core role within, not just your role, but the SU as a whole, what would you do to ensure that welfare officers and society execs can more confidently deal with welfare issues?
Um, well, I'll keep in touch with the welfare officers about how we maximize that. Um, but I'll keep to mainly the current system, involving if anyone has any issues with it, then it will always be fine to mention it, or there's the complaint system. I'll definitely make people aware of the system that's up there. But yeah, I'll I'll definitely talk to the welfare team about because welfare is such a key part of in society. We want to make sure everyone's feeling all right, basically. So yeah, I want to keep on track of that. On top of that,
Yeah. Awesome. I think also, looking at some of the key issues that you might face in the role, we've got stuff like welfare, but we've also got expenses and things like that as well. So how would you work with the SU Finance Office and the student activities team to sort of cut the red tape around small expense requests and event planning?
well, I definitely try and push to limit the cost of those. But obviously, there's a reasonability. So that will always be my position. I'll obviously listen to what they say as well, and try and keep that into account. But for me, as low as possible, mostly for socks, is ideal. Well, mostly from members. Uh, well, I'd have to see what they think, but
Yeah.
that's my position.
Awesome, thank you. And I think our final question today is: you are a postgraduate yourself. So how would you, what would you do to increase engagement with societies and postgraduates at Warwick?
I'd definitely do a lot. 2 years. Definitely try and promote it a lot more. There's a lot of case of like PGs firstly being unaware or feeling it's not for them. Like one of my ideas was I'll try to aim for societies to as many as possible to have a PG rep or something like that, because we have freshers reps and things like that. So I see we should have a PG rep to also um have a representative, and also just the acknowledgement that there is a PG community around campus, and they may have different concerns or things they would like to do, and yeah, I think it would be great if we had more PGs involved, because they can bring experiences from they can bring work experiences, they can bring other uni experiences. I think they could add a lot. Yeah, I think we should encourage a lot more PGs, especially from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's all the questions that I have for you today.
That's all right.
Thank you very much for giving your time and
That's
being
okay.
able to answer some questions ahead of the elections.
That's all right.
Thank you so much.
So that was Ben Kavassi talking to Joe Stanley, the candidate for VP for Societies. Luke, this is another position where there's only one candidate running, but what do you think are some of the big issues relating to societies here on campus that we discussed over the week?
Yeah, I think the biggest one again is that sort of idea of how accessible is joining a society these days. That society fee is still a hefty price to pay for incoming freshers, especially that perhaps didn't really realize that was an expense that they'd have to make. So I think a lot needs to be said on that front. And also in terms of the finances, a lot of the stuff behind the scenes, in terms of this new vice president for societies, how are they going to help societies budget? I think a lot of societies this year have sort of had question marks over the SU as to their funding. And I think that's something that needs to be tackled. So I think that's a really big key thing to look out for.
Indeed. Well, we'll see how campaigning goes for Joe for the position as VP for Societies. Now, we would have two more positions to discuss on the full-time officer team. We've got our presidential interviews coming up in a very special dedicated show that will be also available on the Raw YouTube channels as well after this one. But we've also would be voting for the VP for postgraduate students in the SU Spring Elections. But come election week, we have no candidates for this position. Luke, what do you make of this? That there's no candidates running, and we'll have to have a by-election.
I think it's a big talking point, to be honest, James. I think I interviewed Vash, the current VP for postgrads, earlier this year, and there was a lot that Vash was working towards. It seemed a hell of a lot of sort of inclusivity measures for postgrads that perhaps feel a bit distant from the rest of the student body. And I think that's a really big thing that perhaps us undergrads possibly don't really think about as much. But I think it's a really key position, so it'd be really interesting to see what happens on that front.
Indeed. Obviously, the postgraduate community at Warwick, making up master students, PhD students, who have different concerns as well, related to, obviously, in relation to the undergraduate student body as well. So a very important position for the Students' Union, and we'll have to see what happens with an upcoming by-election. So when you go on to vote on the SU website, there will just be the option to reopen nominations for the VP for postgraduate students position. Well, this brings us to the end of our show dedicated to the interviews for the vice presidential positions in these SU Spring Elections 2024. A reminder, this is where you can go to vote, warwicksu.com/elections, where you can then claim your free drink at Curiosity and those Mentos as well, and other prize draws that you can find out through the SU. Now, Luke, what have you made of the interviews that we've had today and the election week that we have coming up for the different VP positions?
Yeah, to be honest, James, I think it's a really exciting time for students. I think back to this time last year, back when I was a fresher, I almost got quite overwhelmed because there's so much going on throughout the week. There's so many people campaigning. Obviously, you look at the piazza, it's all sort of super done up. I think there's a lot that students can look forward to. And obviously, after hearing all of the candidates speak today, there's a lot in there for students to unpack and really question what the SU have done over the past year and perhaps what they can do differently next year as well.
Well, thank you very much, Luke, for joining me for these Raw and Boar exclusive interviews with the candidates. So do stay tuned for those vice presidential positions. And of course, you can keep up to date with everything that's going on through this week, both through Raw and the Boar as well. And the election show will be taking place on Friday from 6 p.m. on Raw Visual. So don't miss that. Thank you very much for joining us.
Across campus, online, and on 12:51 a.m. This is your student radio station.